everybody, I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, and welcome back to the Disney Debate, where Kat Macberrie, Doug Macberrie, and myself discuss Disney films and other Disney things. However, today we are going back into the Marvel Initiative. Last time on the Marvel Initiative, we talked about Iron Man 1, and how things have changed over the years, and we felt that the film still held up. Honestly, it's still one of the best origin stories for comics and in film form that I've seen in a while. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Doug?
So like I said, it's definitely not my favorite. I mean, I appreciate the film. I'm not a big fan of the Tony Stark character, but definitely like Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal at least. But yeah, I definitely will acknowledge it did significant things for Marvel and, got everything kick-started in the universe.
And what were your thoughts, Miss Cat?
Oh, I still freaking love Iron Man. Like, granted, it's like not the best Marvel film that we've seen to date, but it's still a big staple, and I still enjoy it. And of course, you all know that I love Tony Stark. Take that, Doug. So
Go Team
yeah,
Cap!
bleh. So yeah, I still really love that movie, and watching Hulk made me appreciate it all the more, especially, because, dear God, this movie. I was not looking forward to this in the slightest. I'm like, I saw Tony Stark at the end, and I'm like, Tony, please stay, save this movie. Oh well.
So, yeah, just to recap from last time, since it's been a while since we did our Iron Man 1 episode, we really enjoyed it. Well, not all of us were agreed on it. I think we can all agree that it was a very solid start for the MCU, and it was very promising. Unfortunately, today we're talking about The Incredible Hulk, which is a movie that I'm convinced now does not exist anymore. It has since been retconned in many ways. But also, part of the thing was the problems with this movie is that one hand did not know what the other hand was doing. While Iron Man was, very, very good, it's very, very good origin story in its own right, The Incredible Hulk wanted to do something different, and it just doesn't have the same feel. This very much feels like a, like, you remember Daredevil, right? Like an early 90s
Yeah.
superhero film where, like, they're trying to be dark and edgy, and you barely see the superhero. Like, the Hulk is barely in this movie.
Yeah, it is kind of that era. It's all about the hero and his dark introspection and him being at war with himself over whether or not he's the good guy and yada yada yada. That's definitely what this movie is.
Yeah, and while I wouldn't call it necessarily bad, I think boring is a more apt word for it, and unfortunately, like, it's not as boring as, like, say, the Ang Lee Hulk, but watching it again, I'm just like, there's so much nothing in this film. I think the big thing to note is that the villain doesn't even matter to the film, because they bring in Abomination from the comics and from Hulk's Rogues Gallery, but he isn't the villain, and they make the general out to be the villain for the entirety of the film, except in the last act, it's Abomination who he fights and wins against, and the general's just kind of forgotten.
Yeah, like, because from what I heard, that they obviously they wanted to bring back Captain Ross from like the Ang Lee version, but in this one he's more like obsessed, and he has like his whole ulterior motive going on in terms of like the super soldier serum and stuff. But obviously, from a comic standpoint, he physically can't take on Hulk. So aside from having his whole army behind him, he's not in and of himself a threat. Hence why they brought in Abomination. But the thing is, like, he has no connection to Bruce Banner at all. Like, if anything, he too has his own agenda with wanting to be stronger just for the sake of being stronger, and it just drives him insane. And this turns him into that monstrosity. And yeah, it's like it's just it kind of creates a bit of a disconnect because at least with like Iron Man, his enemy like it was a guy he knew growing up. You know, the guy who helped him run his company, who obviously was like the evil hand guiding him throughout everything. It made sense that he was the villain. In this, it's like, you know, the villain's like, yeah, I obviously can't compete with Hulk, so I'm gonna throw in this other guy, and then totally lose control of him because I should have seen this coming from a mile away.
Yeah, I'm basically of the same mind in there. The enemy of Abomination just feels like he's thrown in there because, yeah, Ross really can't be the main bad guy. It wouldn't make sense. But on the other hand, it's like that just exposes the flaw of the whole movie. It's like, the guy that should be the main villain really can't stand up to the Hulk. So what's even the point?
And this kind of raises I think, a greater problem with Hulk as an entity, as a superhero. And this is something that they've kind of found in the comics, is that individually the Hulk doesn't seem to do very well. Because I think the biggest problem is that like, a lot of the struggle of the Hulk is that he doesn't want to be this monster. It's the man versus the monster. And you don't always have a villain in this, but it's like finding a villain that can stop the Hulk is very hard to do. Even fighting on even footing with the Hulk is kind of hard to do, and we found this with the movies, we found this with the comics. On his own, the Hulk just isn't as compelling as when he's with a group, and as we get later on into the MCU, a lot of the stuff that they do with, like, Planet Hulk as a result of like events is good, but when you talk about everything to do with the Hulk's backstory, a lot of it just does not click with audiences. At least it didn't click with me, because I don't really care about his girlfriend. I don't care about his struggle with the gamma radiation, because all it is just like, oh, I'm a monster, and yeah, like, he's trying to keep his anger in check, and we see all these different techniques that he uses, but we don't really see him as a character.
I mean, it's kind of hard with Hulk to be, this kind of superhero character, because you've got this sort of Jekyll and Hyde dichotomy here. So it's not one character, becoming a hero. It's this character becomes another character, and it's against his will at times. So that's already one strike against them. I think you can make that character compelling, especially because, as we see in like the later movies, we do get, like, Bruce Banner kind of getting into, more of a sync with the Hulk, especially like when you get to Infinity War and Endgame. There is, sort of a connection between the two. So I feel like ultimately in the end, it can be done, but obviously in this early stage of the game, it's very hard.
Mm-hmm.
Another big problem too is the fact that the script for this movie was apparently rewritten like a billion times, and that's mostly Edward Norton's fault, because in exchange for being part of the project, he wanted to have like supervision of the script and to change things where he saw fit. And apparently he would change things in the script pretty much every single day, to the point where the Writers Guild had to step in and tell him to knock it off. In fact, if you look in the writing credits, he actually is credited under a pseudonym, because I don't think he's legally part of the Writers Guild, so they couldn't give him like full credit for it. And I think that's kind of like what drags us down, is because like this is all like centers on this all like centers on Bruce as it should, but at the same time it's like it dwells on just, how much of a tragic character he is and how horrible his life is and how he can't even enjoy the slightest little things. He can't even enjoy sex. And it's just like after a while it's like, dude, we get it. Your life sucks. Can we move on to the superheroing already? Please.
There's also the fact that it's like they're talking about monitoring his heart. So I'm like, so he, rather than it just being that he gets angry and becomes the Hulk, it's, oh no, if his heart rate gets to a certain point, that makes him transform. It's supposed to be, you wouldn't like me when I'm angry, not you wouldn't like me when I'm excited.
You wouldn't like me when I'm hungry.
Yeah, because I always assumed the thing with the Hulk was that it was more his transformation was triggered by like a part of his brain, like the Abdullah oblongata, which controls extreme emotion. Like that would make sense. He feels angry and that triggers it. But the fact that it relies on his heart rate for everything, it's like, so he can't run really fast, he can't work out, he can't really do like any sort of exertion whatsoever without risking a transformation. Like that really sucks.
Honestly, I think the biggest flaw in this film is Edward Norton, and I like Edward Norton as an actor. But the more and more I heard about like the influence that he had on this film, the more and more you can see that this film is just kind of the Bruce Banner show. And that's mostly because they wanted to focus on the Bruce Banner character. I get it, but that Edward Norton, like, everything is about him. The military go and attack him. Everything's about this character. And the reason why, Edward Norton didn't come back is because he was very problematic to work with, and I can see why.
Fun fact, Mark Ruffalo was on the short list to be Hulk originally.
Yeah, he was like the director's first choice, and then the studio wanted to go with Norton instead.
Honestly, I think Mark Ruffalo does a much better job as Hulk, and we're gonna get to that, but it's like, a lot of this film drags, a lot of it is padded and boring, and a lot of it is just, okay, we're repeating the same thing, I'm gonna turn into the Hulk. And it takes them, I was looking at my watch, it takes half the film before we actually see the Hulk.
And maybe it's just me, but Edward Norton himself just doesn't scream nuclear physicist to me.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Like, I don't think Edward Norton's a bad actor, but he doesn't look the part. He definitely looks more like, even though he's skinny like I am, he definitely has more confidence in his presence. I definitely see him more like as the character from Fight Club, the office worker who's going to explode on you, rather than someone who you don't want to make well, actually, I mean, I guess it just, he doesn't really feel right for the Hulk part, to be honest.
Yeah, I just always like him thinking like, the street punk from Fight Club, and it's hard to like think of him in like the other role. It's like you look at Mark Ruffalo and you think like geek or nerd or something, just like the way his mannerism is and like how he comes off and stuff, and then you see like Edward Norton and he has like this weird sort of like standoffish, like self-smug confidence or whatever, and it just doesn't feel right. Like, it's hard to describe. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I just could never really buy him in the part.
I never bought the chemistry between him and his girlfriend. That was the biggest thing, because, I mean, they dropped the girlfriend after this movie, which is part of why I say this movie was retconned. Like, this movie doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned, and as we'll talk about when we get to later movies, but
it's pretty ironic, too, considering this movie itself is supposed to be a retcon of another movie. So this movie itself was retconned.
It's a retcon of a retcon. I mean, it's just like, he and the girl don't have any chemistry. I don't care about the general because he's a douche. And at the end of the movie, we're supposed to care. And Abomination kind of comes out of nowhere. And we have this big fight scene at the end. And don't get me wrong, I thought some of the fight scene was good. But looking back at the effect work, I'm like, I used to think this movie had pretty decent effects for CGI, but looking at it again, it's not aged very well.
Yeah, Hulk looks really like leathery. And like I get they wanted to like make him not look so plasticky like he did in Ang Lee's Hulk, but I don't know, it's like there are some shots where he does look really good, but then other times not so much. Like usually if he's like in shadow or if he's like in the rain or something, that's where like the CGI really sticks out. And like it's also kind of jarring to his eyes. Like they try to, have his eyes be like radioactive green, which is, appropriate and stuff, but it sticks out so much from the CGI. You just can't help but like, like part of your brain is like, yeah, this is definitely fake.
Yeah. And another big thing to me is that the Hulk, they clearly used shadow in order to hide the CGI effects because they didn't feel like it wasn't very good and whatnot. But they also made the Hulk into this gentle giant King Kong type figure. I'm not sure if Peter Jackson's King Kong came out around the same time.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. The scene with the two of them in the rain, it's like, it's King Kong.
Pretty much. And, for somebody who, when his heart rate gets above a certain level, can just, when he gets into that, like, calm state, he doesn't, revert automatically. It just kind of doesn't make sense for how they set it up for that movie.
Yeah.
Because, like, you think he'd still, like, he wouldn't even get that far. He'd still be, like, a huge, like, rage monster. Because, like, you see in, like, later incarnations, like, he's always consistently angry. Like, even when he's, like, helping the others fight, he still has, like, that level of intensity. Like, there's very few moments where you see the Hulk actually, like, calm down and, like, stay calm.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like the entirety of the Hulk is that it's supposed to be when he gets angry, he turns into this creature, and the angrier he gets, the stronger he gets. So I don't know, like just having him be a gentle giant figure doesn't make sense for this incarnation. Doug?
No, doesn't make a lick of sense. I mean, granted, I get he would calm down maybe a little bit, but even then, like, that's when he's, that's about at the point where he'd start to transform back into Banner. So yeah, no, that doesn't make any sense for him to be a gentle giant.
The other thing is that the transformation effect is pretty damn bad. I'm sorry, but the more when I looking at it now, we've had practical effects way better. Like if you've ever seen An American Werewolf in London, like that transformation sequence, it looked painful, but like here it's like blubbery, and like both the transformation of Bruce and Abomination look horribly CGI.
Not to mention, like, the physics of the objects or, whatever around them. Because, like, there is that one scene in the college where, he gets ambushed and he starts transforming, and you see, like, the floor starting to crack. He just lightly touches the window, and you start to see it start to shatter a bit. And I'm like, he barely touched it. What the hell? Where did you get your physics from?
So I had like an interesting thought. Like, I don't know if this would have made the movie better or if it would have made comics fans really mad, but I wondered like what would have happened if they made General Ross Abomination? Because think about it. Because think about it. Like General Ross is the one that has like the big character arc. I say arc loosely throughout this whole movie, because his whole thing is that he's basically Captain Ahab chasing Moby Dick, who in this case is the Hulk. He's like obsessed with tracking him down, getting the super soldier serum out of him, and it always crossed my mind. It's like, what? Well, why doesn't he just take the serum himself and then take down the Hulk? Like, because that would seem like he'd get to a point where he was so desperate to like salvage this mishap that he takes it himself, and then they actively fight. To me, that would have made more sense, rather than bringing in this complete stranger that has motives that are completely separated from what's going on with Hulk.
That could actually make sense. And you know what would have actually helped make this make sense in continuity with the other films? Make this the Grey Hulk. The Grey Hulk was the initial appearance of the Hulk, where he was actually much more supposed to be this Jekyll and Hyde abomination character. You could probably do the Gentle Giant thing with the Grey Hulk because, like, maybe he took the serum at the end of the film, which turned him into the Green Hulk.
Honestly, I heard that do think that would have been a good idea, and I did hear that they were gonna make that a thing in the next Hulk movie, whenever that is, if it ever happens. But yeah, that they would have brought in Grey Hulk, and they would have brought in the Leader. So that would have been nice to have, two villains that actually had something to do with the Hulk that would serve as a nice juxtaposition to him. So it's a shame, though, that we're probably never going to get to see that, but it's a good concept, definitely.
Yeah, it's just, there are so many ideas that I feel like they just threw out the window because at the time, superhero films weren't popular, so they wanted to do things for the kids to make it popular, instead making them boring. You saw this with Daredevil, you saw this with plenty of films in the 90s. But it's just, unfortunately, this movie is the victim of 1,000 cuts by Edward Norton, by the studio interference. You can see the fingerprints everywhere. Edward Norton wanted the film to be centered around himself. The studio wanted everything to be centered around, like, the military. You can definitely see that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it get to the point where halfway through the film, you get to the main scene where he becomes the Hulk and he fights in the school, and how do you make a fight like that boring? But they did.
Yeah, that fight went on forever. It's like honestly, Hulk should have been able to level all of them, like, in no time flat. Considering they showed that he ran like 3,000 miles from Brazil to Guatemala over the course of a night, he should have been able to wipe out, like, that whole platoon, like, within, like, minutes.
Just, like, clap your hands or something, but it's like a lot of it was just like, well, we don't have the budget to do this, we're just gonna have him run and then punch a tank and then throw a tank, and it got old. It reminds me a lot of, like a Godzilla video game, where they want to make you feel badass, but all you're doing is throwing and stomping things, and it gets old after a few minutes.
And of course, they had to throw the girlfriend in there too to kind of hold him back so he doesn't completely, like, murder everybody. But of course, she does nothing but just get in the way and just stares vacantly, like, "Oh my God, look at my boyfriend is this monstrosity, the horror." It's just, like, get out of the way, bitch. Come on.
Yeah. Like, there are so many things about this film that don't make sense, and it's initially supposed to be a reboot of the Ang Lee one, and it technically isn't. It technically is a sequel to the Ang Lee one because it doesn't focus on the origins. It tells the origins in the first 5 seconds, which I think the opening is actually pretty well done, but
well, they had to do it that way.
Drags.
They had to do it that way because when they tested it, they actually had they didn't edit it that way. They just showed it in its entirety, and you thought the movie was slow. That pretty much, froze it to a grinding halt because it's like, we know all this already. We know what happens. We just need to see who the new actors are and then go from there. That's pretty much it.
So yeah, like, there's a few more points that we're probably going to bring up, but, like, there isn't really much more to the film. Like, the way it's structured is the beginning half is all about Edward Norton and him trying to calm the Hulk, and then meeting up with a scientist who turns out to be crazy. and then there's military fight. And that's the halfway point, and then the rest of it is the Abomination fighting the Hulk.
From what I heard, Abomination was supposed to come back in future movies. In fact, they signed on Tim Roth to, like, 3 more movies. Because I think they were going to originally have a cutscene where they showed him back in his human form, like, locked away in some cage or something, hinting that, he's contained, but he could come back as a future threat. And I think they were originally going to bring him back in Age of Ultron, but they just couldn't fit him in. So, like, I personally don't think they need to. I think he's well enough as like a one-off grunt character. That, like, that's really all you need. Considering the amount of really strong characters we now have in the Marvel universe, there's more than enough like brute force for the Hulk to fight. So I think Abomination is unnecessary by this point.
Yeah, there really just wasn't anything to the Abomination. Like, there's nothing for character. He was just, oh, we injected super soldier serum into him because this is supposed to relate to Captain America, and, you know, the government are trying to develop their superhuman serum, and it drove him crazy, and he wanted more power, and that's it. And, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a villain like that. It's just, like, we have much better threats than Abomination that the Hulk can fight.
Interesting little tidbit. When you see the general going to fetch the super serum, he takes it out of a container that has the name of the scientist, the guy who worked with Captain America and like developed the serum. And apparently there's like a thing on the direction that says do not use this without this specific type of radiation. So I think that's why they fucked up with like, and you know, resulted in the Hulk, because they didn't follow that one extra procedure, apparently. It's like, read the directions, people. Jesus Christ. But
yeah, like that's just like these are the scientists here. The government probably just wanted to, you know, run the tests and not like listen to them.
then apparently they like were supposed to have a I heard the opening was going to be different aside from, you know, the obvious flashbacks. You know, cuz at the end they showed the Hulk like in somewhere, and then later on in this movie they were going to show like that he goes to the Arctic and that he's at like a low point, you know, where he's thinking of committing suicide. And they show like at one point I guess he tries to commit suicide but it doesn't work, and the Hulk comes out and smashes the ice, and that's when you see like Captain America get on Earth. So, but they cut that obviously, you know, for being too dark.
Yeah, I mean, they reference that scene in later films, like the big guy spit the bullet back out, but it's like, I think they made the right call with that. I think it would have been a little bit too much to have that type of scene, especially because it was teasing Captain America, but we didn't know how Captain America would do, because, I mean, I love the Captain America film, but not a lot of people do, surprisingly.
That is surprising, actually. In terms of Phase 1, that definitely was among the better.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people who I've talked to, and I mean this is speaking from personal observation, a lot of people say they didn't like it because it was like an old school World War II movie. They didn't like the Red Skull and whatnot, but that's something for another time.
Oh god, a period piece. How awful.
Gee, God forbid they world build.
But, so yeah, that is the Incredible Hulk. It is less boring than the Ang Lee one, but there really isn't much substance to it, not looking back. And it's like, I remember liking it when I initially saw it, but like, just taking a look at the film now, I was looking at my watch so many times when we were watching the film.
Yeah, I was too. Because I knew like all the key scenes, and I'm like, okay, let's just get to this. And then there were like a lot of parts that I forgot about, and I'm like, oh wait, we gotta wade through this bullshit or whatever. Like the whole thing with like the girlfriend, just what, dude? Why would you do that? Why would you risk your safety but getting a glimpse of your girlfriend? And I gotta say, Betty is a horrible girlfriend, because like. I accept that, you know, she accepted that he had run off for his own safety and that she moved on with her life and everything. But, like, the second she sees him again, she drops everything to go back with him, knowing the dangers that are present. She freaking ditches her boyfriend, cheats on her boyfriend to go with her old boyfriend. It's like, wow.
And they have this whole subplot of the boyfriend, and it's in there for what, like, not even 5 minutes of the film.
Hi, Ty Burrell. Bye, Ty Burrell.
Pretty much. I feel so bad for that guy. Like, on the one hand, he did kind of sell them out by telling the military where they were. But then again, he does, like, cover for them when he realizes, oh, wait, this was an awful mistake. I shouldn't have done this. But it's just, like, it sucks, though, because, you know, she's, like, doesn't even talk to him about it. She doesn't even break it off clean or anything. She just instantly hightails it back to Bruce and just, runs off on this epic escape. Like, I'm sure she would have followed him if he hadn't, like, ditched her. Like, I'm kind of glad that he did. Like, she just was, like, bland as a character. She's a sexy lamp archetype. She's there just to provide, like, warmth and, some sort of, like, beacon of happiness for Bruce. That's about it.
And pants.
And pants, stretchy pants. Extremely stretchy pants. I feel really bad for the side characters in this film, because like the boyfriend gets the shaft. None of the military people, like they get killed for no reason, just because they're doing their jobs. And
they're the military in a superhero film. They're always woefully unprepared.
And then there's his boss at the factory who loses like millions of dollars worth of equipment for just because he leads them in there.
I know, like, I felt so bad. I'm like, there's no fucking way the military's gonna pay for that. They're gonna say, oh, it's a crime scene, and just write it off. And the poor boss is gonna have to, like, rebuild his factory from scratch if he can even do so. Like, poor guy.
Why did he even go in that factory in the first place?
Hey, we have these sets. We may as well use them.
It's like you could have ran into any other building or something. You had to choose your own, the factory that you worked at to hide from the bully.
I will give this movie credit with one thing, though. We finally learned how Stan Lee became the Hulk. Because he drank some of Bruce's tainted blood.
I did it one time. Honest. Wish you had the power to get out of my store.
I do like that Stan Lee cameo. Not as good as the Iron Man Hugh Hefner cameo, but it's a good cameo.
Technically, they cameo him twice. Like, they have a restaurant, like a pizzeria that Bruce works at called Stanley's. And actually, he's not the only cameo too. They brought back Lou Ferrigno in this, and he was in the other Hulk movie too.
Why wasn't he in any of the other MCU, like any good MCU movies?
Supposedly, he shows up in a voice capacity as the Hulk in at least Age of Ultron.
No, he definitely voices the Hulk, like in this movie. I don't remember if he does in later movies, but he definitely this movie, which I'm glad, because the man deserves it. He is the iconic Hulk, after all. Or I should say, like, the oldest, acting Hulk.
Now, while there are some things that are good about this film, and a lot of bad, let's talk about how this film is retconned. Because this film technically is not part of the MCU.
It is and it isn't. Would you like to
take it away, Kat?
Well, like, it is and it isn't. Because obviously, pretty much most of the main cast does not come back. Because obviously Ed Norton doesn't come back, Liv Tyler doesn't come back. Like, the only person that really comes back is William Hurt as General Ross. But for whatever reason, in the other movies, he just, he's not fired because of this whole breaking Harlem incident. So, yeah, he still comes back. But, yeah, this movie is kind of a retcon. Like, they obviously allude to it at times. But for the most part, yeah, we can agree that this didn't happen. Because, Abomination doesn't come back. They set up the leader, and he never becomes a thing. Like, and unfortunately, due to legal reasons, that's probably not going to happen for a good long time. Because from what I heard, the reason they were going to make more Hulk movies, the problem is that Universal has distributing rights. And so the thing is, they own the Hulk, they just can't promote anything with the Hulk without Universal's consent. So it's kind of like... kind of the whole thing that, like what Sony's doing with Spider-Man at the moment. And I highly doubt that Universal's going to give up those rights anytime soon, considering, they use the Hulk in their merchandising for Universal Studios. And if they gave that up, that means that Disney could incorporate the Hulk into their rides at Disney World, and obviously Universal Studio doesn't want to do that. So,
Yeah.
so yeah,
I mean,
it's
it's part of the reason why like they said no more individual Hulk movies, just like ensemble pieces, which is why we got Planet Hulk with Thor Ragnarok, which I thought was good, but individually as a film, The Incredible Hulk, it just there's so many problems that happen behind the scenes, legal issues, rights issues, um half the cast not coming back. I'm convinced that part of it happened, but off screen. And in like as we'll see in later movies, none of the stuff with Edward Norton comes back.
yeah, pretty much. Like all I know now is that Hulk managed to learn, like Bruce managed to learn to control his anger by basically being angry all the time. So I guess, that's what the whole thing at the end of this movie was about. Him just accepting his anger and just giving into it. And
But
we
that
know
contradicts the heart rate.
I know, like
Screw the heart rate.
yeah, it's like screw all that noise,
Mm-hmm.
because we have all this, and then he never mentions Betty again. With good riddance. That's fine. And I mean, in terms of Hulk villains, I don't really know Hulk's his whole like rogues gallery per se, but I highly doubt we're actually gonna see anything from that. Like we might get like one of his crossover things one day if Disney ever ever decides to put that into practice, but I doubt it.
I mean, they could maybe do something like the Gargoyle, because they kind of alluded to it a little bit, but like the Hulk doesn't have the biggest rogues galleries. There's a reason why he's normally like he's been a part of the X-Men, he's been a part of like the Avengers. His villains individually aren't really the focus of the Hulk.
Right, but I'm saying like his two of his iconic fights I can think of the top of my head. His fight with Wolverine. I mean,
Yes.
Disney owns Fox now, so theoretically that could be a thing. Same thing with Fantastic Four. The Hulk versus the Thing. I would love to see that personally. So, and then, again, owned by Fox, but it depends if Disney ever decides to actually go that route. And again, it's one of those situations like with Civil War in which we need to have a reason for them to fight.
I mean, they could go the direction of, like, say, Secret Wars, where, like, they have the Hulk in, lifting up a mountain, an iconic Hulk moment. But, I mean, it really depends. Finding someone who's on evil, like, even keeling with the Hulk is very hard. They've only done it a couple of times with, say, World War Hulk and Red Hulk, but even then, like, it's very hard.
Well, one good thing now that we're in like post Endgame era is that now we have the whole multiverse thing going on. So theoretically, they could start over again if they wanted to. I'm not saying that's what I want, but it's a possibility. Actually
in the multiverse of madness.
Yeah. Bring back, rage-induced Hulk. Bring in Red Hulk. Bring in Gray Hulk. Bring in like a million Hulks, an army of Hulks. Theoretically, they could do that.
We have an army. We have a Hulk.
We have an army of Hulks.
I don't see how that's a party.
Yeah. The point is, like, it sucks, this whole thing, because this should be an important part of the MCU, given the Hulk is one of the big iconic Avenger characters. It's just a shame that that didn't live quite up to it, and now it seems the films are going out of their way to ignore it. You can see why, and it's kind of sad. And it just makes me
it's
wish.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, it makes me wish that they had gone a different route, and that there wasn't all this legal bullshit getting in the way of creative minds that could possibly salvage this.
You know what it is? Like, you remember Ghost Rider, the original Ghost Rider film? Like, it's the same situation, because I love Ghost Rider and I love the Hulk. The problem is translating that into the screen where you have to have human characters is not always easy, and you have these two characters that could theoretically, like, on their own be fantastic, but they have so much history behind them. What do you go with? And studio interference led to this. And Ghost Rider 2. And yeah, but
Ugh.
you know,
We don't talk about that.
we don't talk about that one. I saw that in a hotel, and I'm like, what the hell did I just watch?
It's like, why is Nicolas Cage making faces at me?
Nicolas Cage, God. But yeah, that's what the Incredible Hulk is. It is the Ghost Rider of the MCU. Unfortunately, it could have been great, but I mean, I think that we all should just ignore its existence and move on. Unfortunately, even the end credit scene where Tony Stark appears and talks to the General, I didn't really feel the same impact that I felt when at the end of Iron Man 1 where they're getting the band together, you know?
Not to mention it gets contradicted in Iron Man 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too. Canonically, it makes no sense.
So that's another reason why it's retconned. It's like, okay, this is an alternate universe Tony Stark because he doesn't want to play. He can't play well with others.
Well, let's be honest here.
Billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, and what does that make you?
Oh, did you ever hear about the German cut of this movie?
The German cut.
Yeah, so
God.
so apparently in Germany, they're like, as anybody who runs a YouTube channel knows, Germany does not like a lot of content, considering how much of the shit that they block from here. So when they did a cut of the movie for Germany, they did 3 different versions. They had the uncut version, they had, I think, the rated 17 version, and then they had one for, like, I guess 12-year-old version. Like, basically they chopped it up to the point where you can call it Hulk abridged. And it was so bad that people were actually complaining to the cinemas and to the studios because of how bad it was. Like, you thought it was long and egregious, like that what we watched. Like, apparently it was way worse in Germany.
Oh God. 9. I want 9 part of that. Oh, okay.
Like, apparently it got so bad to the point where the German cinemas actually had to put a warning on their website telling people, yes, this was edited from the American version. Do not yell at us.
All right. I don't know. Doug, final thoughts.
This is the worst remake of Reservoir Dogs ever. I mean, they only have Mr. Green and Mr. Blue. What happened to Mr. Pink? But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's not a terrible film. It's just there. That's all that really can be said about it. It's got its interesting, history and everything, and it's there. It was early in, Marvel's planning, so, I mean, obviously, they're going to fumble around at first. But eventually, they do find their footing afterward. So, I mean, it's not like it really did a whole lot of damage.
It didn't kill the franchise. I mean, right now we're like, we have 1.5 good movies. Like, the Hulk is okay. I wouldn't call it necessarily bad. It's there. So 1.5 good movies, not enough to sink the ship just yet. Next we have Iron Man 2, but before we get to that, Kat, final thoughts?
Yeah, pretty much what Doug said. Like, it's not as bad as Ang Lee's Hulk, but it's not that good either. I can see why it's like the lowest making Marvel movie to date. I felt like it could have had potential, but because of all the rewrites and, studio interference and whatnot, it just, became a bland shell of what it could have been. And it's such a shame. And, like, most of the actors I really don't care for in it. I actually do like William Hurt as General Ross, believe it or not. He's just, he's like the perfect archetypical like military dude that is a jerk and you just want to punch him in the face. So he just is that type of person. But yeah, the whole film is just, it's slow and it's tedious. Like, the action when it's there it doesn't keep my attention, and it just, like I said, I can see why this is forgotten for a reason. Like, granted, I don't hate this near as much as I hated Iron Man 3. That to me is like bottom of the barrel in terms of Marvel films. But I don't think this movie's that bad, but it's pretty close.
As for me, this is the Ghost Rider of the MCU. It's a film that I don't want to see again. It's not bad, it's just kind of there, and it needed more horses. In any case, I am Zenith Warrior Princess,
I'm Kat Macberrie.
I'm Doug Macberrie.
and we'll see you next time for Iron Man 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Hey, this is Megami33. Thank you for watching Zenith Will Review. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome videos. If you like what you see, check out the Patreon page at patreon.com/Zenith Will Review.